So I live in a rural area not too far, but a good 25 to 30 minutes from the nearest town. With a low crime rate and low population, I was thrilled to get a break from people and move out of the city to a place that offers new experiences and nice scenery. But none of these things are worth having if you are scared for your own life and safety in your own home. A couple of months ago, not long after moving into the home that I still live in, an incident would occur that would cause me many sleepless nights. It was around 7 p.m. on a Friday. I was relaxing after getting home from work and eating a well-made dinner that took a couple of minutes in the microwave. I was watching the one good channel my receiver picked up. However, it wasn't long before the lights and sound of the television slowly began to fade as I fell asleep. Few minutes into the sleep, I awoke up to the sound of my dog barking at the large window in the living room that looks into the cornfield behind my house. His name was Buck. I thought nothing of it as he barked at shadows and anything that might move. I decided to go lie down in my bedroom as I didn't fall asleep in the living room intentionally. I was tired, so I quickly fell asleep, but I was woken up by Buck's barking again. I brushed it off as he likes to chase shadows and barks more frequently when it's dark out. After getting him to quiet, I tried falling back asleep, but after some times, I heard the sound of Buck whimpering down the hall in the kitchen. I thought maybe he needed to go out or was hungry. So I got up and started walking towards the door, but I quickly stopped due to pure horror. I heard the voice of an older male singing a song in a slow pace, but I didn't hear any jingle of the tags on my dog's collar. Becoming more worried and unaware of whatever was going on in my house, I hesitantly decided to peer down the hall into the kitchen. I wish I hadn't. There was a pool of blood surrounding Buck and a skinny bald guy wearing an oversized torn shirt holding a knife in his hand. He didn't notice me as I backed into the room silently. I opened the window and climbed out. I had so many questions, and so many thoughts. Many questions went through my head as I headed across the street in the cornfield. I called the cops and watched from across the street while I waited for them. I was expecting the police to take a while to respond as the station was far away, but lucky for me there were cars in the area. They swept the house and came out with a deformed-looking middle-aged man with a crazed look on his face and blood all over him. He refused to answer any questions as to why he was in my house, smiling even as they forced him into the car. He was eating my dog with his bare hands when the responders entered the house, not stopping even when he was confronted. I still wonder what would have happened if he had seen me that day and how violently he must have killed Buck. I since then adopted a Rottweiler and obtained my carry license, as well as additional security added to my home. But I will never forget that night. So I am a 34-year-old male living in a rural town in New Mexico. I had just gotten a divorce with my wife. This is relevant because it was the reason I had to find a new home. I had been searching for several months to find a house that was big enough for my 4 girls. Money was tight for me because of the divorce, so it took me a while. As soon as I was about to lose hope in finding a house that could give me and my girls enough space, I found one. It was a big house in the middle of nowhere. Taking them to school wasn't a problem because the girls would spend time at my house during weekends and breaks. I bought the house and I can't deny it was a little nerve-wracking to be living so far away from the nearest town. In the daytime, it was peaceful and so quiet. This peacefulness from the daytime helped me get over my recent divorce. Things were going fairly well when I moved into my new home. I now had a lot of space and freedom to work on myself. After I was done unpacking, I decided to take a break. I turned on the TV and cracked open a beer to wind down. I then started to drift off until I heard a loud bang. It was the sound of my windows shutting. I had forgotten to close the windows and the wind had shut it. I decided it was getting late anyway, so I locked the windows and headed to my room. That's when I heard a whisper. I looked at my alarm clock and realized that it was 3:20 a.m. I was confused as to where the whisper could be coming from. My daughters were at their mother's house for the next few days. I was supposed to be alone in this house. I was awake for 30 minutes and played it off as being the stress of my recent divorce. Nothing happened for the rest of the night. The next few days random things started to occur. Locked doors were unlocked. I could hear the wind blowing, but it sounded like screams. One day as I was laying around, I heard something in the attic crash. I wasn't aware that we even had an attic because I hadn't moved anything into it. I walked into the attic and found some pottery that had been smashed. I was confused because there was no furniture on which the ceramics could have been placed. It was just an empty room with smashed pottery. I cleaned it up and locked the attic. I was now becoming more concerned about the weekend approaching because my daughters were coming. That day I decided to take my car into town to buy some sage. I thought that it was possible that there could be negative spirits and energy inhabiting the house. I saged the entire house, seeing it would do anything. It had worked for a few weeks and my daughters had enjoyed me finding my place. My youngest daughter was 2 at the time, and my oldest daughter was 10. But things soon reverted to their previous ways, with locked doors opening and the sounds. The only thing was that this time it would feel as though the room was spinning, and I was always nauseous. I tried to sage again, but it just seemed to make things worse. With this issue arising, I had been looking to move out, getting out of the rural countryside. I had found a house that was much smaller but was in a town. I told my daughters to come over one last time because I was moving yet again. I had put my 2 youngest daughters to bed while my 2 eldest daughters and I watched Disney movies. After the movie was finished, I put them both into bed. I wanted to relax for a while, so I turned the TV back. Then I slowly drifted off to sleep. That's when I heard a soft and sweet voice calling me. It was my youngest daughter. I asked her what she was doing, but she didn't answer. She ran into the kitchen, so I followed her in the pure darkness. That's when I started to hear my other daughters started screaming. I ran into their rooms to find them all in deep sleep. I ran down to the kitchen again to check my youngest daughter, but she wasn't there. I ran towards her room calling her name, and to my surprise she was also sleeping peacefully. I didn't slept at all that night. If she was sleeping here, then who did I saw earlier? I was just longing to leave that house. The next morning I asked all my daughters if they had heard anything, but they all said no. I moved on from that moment and trailed off, just telling them that I had a bad dream. I then called the realtor asking if there was anything wrong with the house before I moved out. To my surprise, the realtor told me that the house was built over a Native American graveyard. I felt devastated that I didn't know about it. After I had moved out of the house, I decided to plant wildflowers at the house to pay my respects to the people I was living over. So my name is Thomas and I'm a 20-year-old Italian university student. I've had a close paranormal encounter recently. I thought something was wrong with my house and I couldn't fully explain it, but when I finally ended up discovering what this strange phenomenon was, it quite shocked me. So I used to live alone in a small rented house which was recently reconstructed. Most of the time I used to spend my time in university, but I would usually return home for meals and to write up ideas. I am an aspiring screenwriter, and on a normal day, I would get back home, eat, write a little, and then go to bed. First few days after moving in was normal, but after that, I felt like something was clearly off about the house. Things that I usually find with ease would end up in absurd places, and I would hear strange noises in my small attic. The house was actually recently rebuilt after an earthquake. So one day, as usual, I returned home from university and went to bed. While I was lying on my bed, I clearly heard footsteps in the other room. I got up from the bed and decided to check, but no one was there. I thought it was because of my tiredness and went to bed. I decided that the next few nights I was going to stay up later than usual to see if I could hear or notice any unusual in my house. One night, as I was walking slowly in my corridor later in the night, I saw a figure running and hiding in the living room. My breath stopped for a second. Imagine living alone and seeing someone running in your house. I tried to grab something to defend myself, but when I arrived in the room, the person was gone. I can't even try to imagine where he or she could have gone. All the windows were closed. I couldn't sleep at all. As far as I can remember, I think it was around 3 a.m. in the morning and I was still awake. As I was staring at the ceiling, a loud crash came from my kitchen. I immediately ran as quickly as I could to my kitchen, and when I arrived, again there was no one. I was so scared that I shut the kitchen door and got outside of the house. I immediately called the cops because at that time I thought it was a person messing with me and told them everything. The cops arrived a few minutes later and searched the house, but they found no one there. They were about to leave, but a cop approached me with a serious look. He asked me whether I believed in ghosts or not. I said yes, and he told me that a man had died in the house because of the earthquake months ago. He thinks that his spirit is still in the house and recommended that I move to a new house. I called my friend and only went back to the house in the morning. I called the owner and left the place with all my stuff. So now I am currently living in a new house with my friend. Things are going well now, but thinking about that night still scares me.